The United States loves its superpower status. Huge military, huge economy, huge debt. Let's say the IOUs get called in, or one state decides that Stars and Stripes could use one less star. Could Texas ride off into the sunset? Would California become its own avocado-fueled empire? And what happens to Virginia? Which states could actually survive going solo? Let's find out. Our first stop in this secession tour, the Lone Star State. I'm not sure if you've noticed, but Texas is big. Ridiculously big. Almost 269,000 square miles of barbecue and don't mess with me energy. It used to be its own country, too. Let's be honest, it's never really gotten over that breakup. We've all been there. If the Republic of Texas ever made a comeback, it wouldn't just survive. It'd flex. Bigger, richer, and probably insufferably proud about it. The Rio Grande, a built-in moat, and the coastline, a 3,400-mile welcome mat for global trade. No Panama-style bottlenecks, just smooth sailing, most of the time. There could be a choke point, but I'll get to that in a bit. Texas is the Costco of American trade. Oil, gas, electricity, beef, tech, wind, you name it, it's got it. Discounted hot dogs? Probably. It produces more energy than any other state. And it's not even close. It's the country's oil and gas capital, sitting 20.1 billion barrels of crude and literal mountains of natural gas. Florida comes in a distant second, but it's just making up the numbers. Texas is the one keeping the lights on for half the country. Literally, if the US ever got unplugged, Texas would be the one muttering, "Fine, I'll do it myself." Basically, there's more energy here than the state knows what to do with. It's the hyperactive toddler of America, except instead of finger paint, it's splashing crude oil everywhere. Texas doesn't just power itself, it powers everyone else too. 68% of all American energy that goes abroad comes from here. That's $154.3 billion worth in 2024 alone. Enough to make OPEC give the side eye. But energy's only half the story. 86% of Texas land is tied up in agriculture. So basically the entire map. If it's flat, sunny, and smells of manure, someone's making money off of it. 14% of Texans work in agriculture, planting, ranching, or yelling at the weather. Texas isn't just feeding itself, it's feeding you. Cattle lead the charge, worth billions on their own. Add eggs, oats, pecans, citrus, peanuts, rice, wheat, and corn, it's a grocery aisle with state pride. And if you can eat it or wear it, Texas probably branded it. One Texas farmer feeds or clothes 155 people. Sounds heroic until you realize if Texas kept it all, the state's 30% obesity rate would look modest. So it exports. The rest of America gets dinner. Texas says, y'all are welcome. But Texas isn't just food and oil. It's silicon, steel, and rocket fuel. Tesla and SpaceX moved in, Oracle followed, and Caterpillar rumbled south. Texas is always building something. Cities, highways, entire industries. Everything's bigger here, especially ambition. And if anyone's thinking of taking that away, good luck. Texas has the largest National Guard in the country and more than 1 million veterans. When Texans say don't mess with Texas, it's not a slogan, it's a warning label. Remember that choke point I mentioned though? On the other side of the Gulf of America, formerly the Gulf of Mexico, Florida. If it bothered to try, it could team up with communist Cuba and maybe turn the Gulf into a choke point. It sounds like a comic book villain plot. In this world, possible. Still, that would be about the only real weakness Texas has. Everything else, that's wide open. And if you like these geography tours, make sure to hit subscribe. I'm holding it together about as well as a Texan power grid. Now let's hop across the Gulf to Florida, the only state that can weaponize humidity. Florida has the second longest coastline of any state by some measures, over 8,400 miles. No choke points, no bottlenecks, just open water and open wallets. Perfect for shipping things out. Which is good, because it's not just a tourist trap with oranges and Florida Man. It's a net food exporter. In 2023, it shipped out $221 million in fresh fruit, $372 million in vegetables. Enough strawberries, tomatoes, mangoes, and sugarcane to feed an army or make cocktails for everyone on Miami Beach, which during spring break is basically the same thing. Not into plants? Try seafood. Nearly $500 million worth exported. Florida can feed itself just fine. The problem is power. It burns through energy but has almost no oil or gas, less than 0.1% of US reserves, an energy giant with an empty tank. Offshore, there's oil, enough to pump 1 million barrels a day, but drilling's been banned since 2006, and that ban now runs to 2032. Not that it matters. Florida banned itself decades ago. Long-term thinking isn't exactly its brand. Unlike Texas, Florida is betting on solar, but renewables cover just 10% of demand, and there are only 2 nuclear plants. You can't power a state on vibes and sunlight alone. Fortunately, Florida's rich. Median income is $73,000, and money buys fuel. A deal with Texas makes sense. Energy for access. Texas keeps the lights on. Florida keeps the Caribbean trade open. Surrounded by water on 3 sides, it's easy to defend. So, can the Sunshine State survive as its own country? Sure, who's gonna take on Florida man? Florida's other major resource, retirees. Mostly from the Big Apple, the next stop on the breakaway tour. New York State is one of the centers of the world's financial industry, and it's thanks to New York City, the beating heart of capitalism. And if you haven't guessed, New Yorkers are rich. The median household income was $82,100, but wealth and influence only get you so far. Those are soft assets, good for cocktail parties, but bad for blackouts. A real country needs industry, infrastructure, and a way to keep the heat on in February. And that's where New York quietly overperforms. In 2024, it exported $73 billion in manufactured goods. Everything from steel to semiconductors. It doesn't just trade money, it makes things. The city's harbor is one of the best in the world. The whole reason it became an American city in the first place. Geography made New York rich. The Port of New York and New Jersey isn't just busy, it's vital. The country's top oil import hub, the artery keeping the frozen Northeast alive. Pull that plug and half the coast flatlines before breakfast. But that's the problem. New York doesn't have enough power to keep itself running. It ranks 4th in population, but only 10th in electricity production. It imports about 4.5% of its electricity from Canada. It's hard to go solo when you're still plugged into Quebec. And then there's Indian Point Nuclear Power Plant, or at least there was. It shut down in 2021. A quarter of New York City's power was cut overnight. It's the kind of move that says, what if we made blackouts more artisanal? Now the city that never sleeps burns more fossil fuel just to stay awake. Only New York could shut down a power plant and call it progress. New York imports roughly 85% of its energy. It produces almost no natural gas. Food isn't much better. It imports billions of dollars worth every month. And no, rooftop kale gardens won't fix that. New York can't survive alone. Not yet, at least. It would have to buy and bluff its way out of every crisis, loudly. It would trade finance, media, and influence for food and fuel, selling charm the same way it once sold mortgages, right before the crash. But New York does have one thing going for it, a way to be a little less needy. It's right under the ground upstate. Not oil, not gold, just good old-fashioned resources. The kind you can dig up, melt down, or accidentally pollute a river with. It's the key to survival. Dirty, loud, and inconvenient. Perfectly New York. Just look across the border. New York sits on the Marcellus and Utica shale gas fields. Well, it shares it with Pennsylvania, like awkward roommates. The Marcellus alone is massive. It's the biggest deposit in the country, but New York banned fracking in 2014. Great for the environment, terrible for survival. Meanwhile, Pennsylvania doesn't shut up about it. If it goes solo, maybe New York drills. It has to. Tapping the Marcellus could finally make the state energy independent, maybe even powerful. The question is how far it goes. Does it become the next empire, or just the world's slickest tax haven? So far, we've seen how Florida, Texas, and New York would cope. Sure, maybe these are a bit predictable, but stay tuned for the rest and let me know in the comments if any surprised you. I already mentioned Pennsylvania, so let's visit there next. Pennsylvania's sittin' pretty. Gas fields flowing, rigs humming, like a hipster who found craft beer and made it a lifestyle. non-stop. A little too proud of it. The state has 763 trillion cubic feet in reserves. Texas is first, sure, but Pennsylvania's the overachiever who won't shut up about it. Rockefeller's long gone, but the state's still cashing in. It's also America's biggest electricity exporter to Ohio, Maryland, New Jersey, and energy-starved New York. The grid's version of a food truck, and it's not stopping at gas. Governor Josh Shapiro's even floated restarting 3 Mile Island as a power plant for AI data centers. Nothing says progress like running tomorrow's tech on yesterday's near disaster. Food's a weaker spot. $2.2 billion in agricultural exports, mostly dairy, soybeans, and poultry. Pennsylvania still eats more than it sells. But energy buys leverage, and steel, and everything else. The Port of Philadelphia shipped out $46 billion in goods in 2024. Not bad for a river port that still smells faintly of cheesesteaks and industrial runoff. But there's the catch. Philly's entire lifeline runs down the Delaware River, one choke point away from disaster. And sitting at that choke point, New Jersey, the state equivalent of a traffic cone that learned to hold grudges. So maybe the best play is obvious. Pennsylvania, New York, and New Jersey form an alliance. Energy from the west, finance from the east, attitude from the middle. In other words, business as usual. So Pennsylvania can stand on its own 2 feet, for now, but give it time. The West Coast's middle child always wants attention. Washington stands a pretty solid chance of going solo. Its geography helps. A long Pacific coastline, no major choke points except maybe Puget Sound, and that's a big maybe. It's one of the busiest shipping lanes in the country, home to the ports of Seattle and Tacoma, the 5th busiest in the US. As long as Washington stays friendly with Canada, the trade keeps humming. If not, British Columbia might want to think twice before picking a fight with the state that can turn the lights off from across the border. Right now, Washington cranks out more electricity than it needs. It exports power to California and, yes, Canada. But that demand's about to spike. The state's 2035 ban on new gas-powered cars could nearly double electricity use. Luckily, Washington's sitting on a hydropower gold mine. A quarter of America's hydroelectricity comes from here. The Grand Coulee Dam alone makes 15 terawatt-hours a year, enough to run the entire West Coast's coffee machines indefinitely. But the future isn't all waterfalls and renewable smugness. Washington produces almost no oil or gas. It's a net importer of both. A green giant with a fossil fuel dependency. Fusion startups like Helion, Zap, and Avalanche are trying to fix that. Helion's even building the world's first fusion plant to power a Microsoft data center by 2028. If it works, Washington becomes untouchable. If it doesn't, well, it'll keep being the guy at the party insisting fusion's only 10 years away. The good news, Washington has food and money to bargain with. It's a net food exporter, hundreds of millions in fruit, vegetables, wheat, and seafood. The kind of place that could feed itself and still send the leftovers south. It's rich, too. The median household income is around $94,600 in 2023. And it's not just tech, it's industry. Over $40 billion in manufactured exports, led by $18.5 billion in transportation equipment. Aircraft, ships, missiles. So blockading the Puget Sound sounds less like a strategy and more like a death wish. Washington's got energy, exports, and engineering on its side. Keep the pipelines open, and it's one of the few states that could actually thrive as an independent country, especially if one of those fusion startups ever works. Hopefully without vaporizing Seattle's coffee supply, or half of Microsoft. All this energy talk, and no trip to the far north, really? There's another place that should be the silver medalist here. Should is the operative word. Alaska might be cold, but it's not weak. It's one of the few places that could actually stand on its own. More than 10% of its residents are veterans, the highest rate in the country. The state is effectively one big, armed homeowners association with snowmobiles. Geography helps too. It's practically a fortress. Water on 3 sides, ice on the 4th, and isolation doing the rest. Economically, Alaska's got the fuel to stay alive. more than 3 billion barrels of oil in reserve and pumping 465,000 barrels a day. Enough cash to keep the government fat. It literally pays people for existing, about $1,000 to $2,000 a year per resident. It's also sitting on 125 trillion cubic feet of natural gas. The catch? It can't export it. Not without the liquefied gas pipeline it's been fantasizing about since disco was still a thing. Food, though. Total disaster. Between 90 and 95% of everything eaten here comes from somewhere else. The state ranks dead last in agricultural exports. Sure, there's seafood, there's plenty of it, but no beef, no grain, no large-scale farming. The land's too cold, too rugged, and too busy trying to kill you, which, ironically, is why Russia sold it in the first place. So survival comes down to trade. Oil and gas for food. The median income's about $86,600, but most of that rides on the energy sector. Manufacturing, an afterthought. Maybe 2,000 people total. When oil money dries up, so does Alaska. Still, geography gives it leverage. Energy is power, literally. A deal with Washington could keep everyone warm. Oil and gas for food and tech. Two frontier states keeping each other alive. And compared to the chaos further south, Alaska's isolation might be its biggest advantage. It's hard to starve the state that everyone else needs just to stay warm. Okay, Alaska, Washington, and Pennsylvania look like they can handle things. Have any surprised you so far? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Let's go from the far north to the deep south. Mississippi's got the map on its side. Gulf access, control of the river, and a front row seat to the trade routes that actually matter. But that's where the good news stops. Fast. In 2023, nearly half the state's revenue, $10.6 billion, came straight from Washington. That's 47% of its entire budget. The federal government is Mississippi's sugar daddy. And if that relationship ends, Mississippi is searching down the back of the couch for a spare billion or 10. It gets worse. The state burns 4 times more energy than it produces, barely any natural gas. Sure, there's a little oil, 232,000 barrels in April of 2025, which sounds nice until you realize that puts it behind 14 other states. Mississippi's not an energy player. It's on the outside of the game watching on. Food's not much better. It exported $2.5 billion in agricultural exports, but most of that was from processing crops grown somewhere else. Roughly 90% of what's on grocery store shelves is imported. Add a median household income of $54,200, one of the lowest in the country, and the picture goes from bleak to please send snacks. Still, geography throws it a lifeline. The Gulf and the Mississippi River make it a natural trade and refining hub. The Fertile Delta could support more farming, if it's managed right. Big if. But without industry, energy, or cash flow, Mississippi doesn't have the muscle to go solo. So what's the play? Pick a side. The Republic of Greater Texas or Florida's Gulf Coalition. Both have energy, infrastructure, and cash. Mississippi has geography, and geography in this world is bargaining power. Just enough to matter, not enough to call the shots. It's not all bad news. Mississippi wouldn't be lonely at the bottom. Virginia's packing bags and moving in. The state's median income hovers around $90,000. Only 29% of state revenue comes from Washington. Sounds independent, right? Except most of Virginia is Washington. Federal agencies, military bases, and defense contractors as far as the eye can see. If DC collapses, Northern Virginia is in the fallout zone. Geography helps, a little. The Atlantic coastline gives it access to trade routes, which it definitely needs, because it's not powering itself anytime soon. Virginia ranked dead last in crude oil production in 2024. 3,000 barrels. That's not an industry, that's a hobby. It imports nearly all of its natural gas and uranium, and it's the largest net importer of electricity in the country, buying 36% of what it uses. Virginia doesn't generate energy, it siphons it. If the lights go out in DC, the federal paychecks stop. Suddenly, Virginia's AI data centers and manufacturing plants, $15.4 billion in exports last year grind to a halt. Overnight, the state that builds America's drones becomes a graveyard of dead screens and unpaid engineers. But there's one saving grace: food. Virginia's a net exporter. The soil still works, the cows still moo. With the right alliances, Virginia could anchor a mid-Atlantic republic. A little trade, a little diplomacy, and a lot of pretending things are fine. Not independence, but survival. Which, these days, that's the same thing. How about some wild cards? Maybe these places survive, maybe they don't. Hawaii's survived isolation before, centuries of it. It knows how to wait. And its geography still makes it one of the most defensible spots on Earth. Water everywhere. Mountains sharp enough to cut you. The problem? That smoothie you're sipping wouldn't be cold, or cheap, or possibly even real fruit. The islands have zero oil or gas reserves. None. They live off imported fuel, mostly liquefied natural gas from Japan, which is fine until it stops. Then Hawaii goes dark faster than a tourist's phone after 10,000 sunset selfies. Food's no better. 90% of it is imported. Decades of bulldozing farmland to build resorts seemed like a great idea at the time. Rebuilding that base would take years, and would probably ruin the view from the infinity pool. So no, Hawaii doesn't go it alone. Its best move is to become useful again. A middle point between what's left of Asia and the Western states. The world's last layover. Independence would be brutal. But survival? Hawaii already knows how to do that. It's been doing it since the rest of us learned how to burn things for energy. Preferably this time with a generator and a cold pina colada. Colorado's another wild card, and a pretty strong one too. Hidden behind the Rockies, it's basically America's panic room. One of the most defensible places in the country, and the third largest exporter of goods. It moves nearly $10 billion in manufactured products. It's also turning into a tech hub. Some even call it the Silicon Valley of quantum, which is impressive until you realize nobody knows what that means. The catch? A lot of that boom came from federal money. Pull the plug on Washington and those startups lose their lifeline. Suddenly, the Valley of Quantum looks more like a really expensive games room. Still, the fundamentals are solid. Colorado ranks 4th in oil production, 172 million barrels in 2024. It makes more energy than it uses, and despite the mountains, it's a net food exporter. Top in millet, and who doesn't love millet? 80% of its wheat shipped out. No coastline, no problem. Colorado doesn't need ports. It's got power, food, and altitude, aka the survivalist's starter pack. Or Colorado might wind up joining with a neighboring state. Quick, what do you think of when you hear Utah? Salty lakes? Mormons? The settlers who came west to build their own world. You know, one that didn't laugh at them. They wanted isolation, sanctuary, a place where faith could grow and judgment couldn't find them. It sounded insane, until it worked. Turns out the middle of nowhere makes a great headquarters. Sure, it's landlocked. No coastline, no ports, no quick imports. This is a hard sell, but honestly, Utah doesn't need an ocean. It's sitting on an energy smorgasbord. 9th largest producer in the country, 66 million barrels of oil in 2024. And it pumped out more natural gas than it used, enough to keep the lights on and the temples glowing for years. Food? Covered. Utah's a net exporter, and frozen beef is the star of the show. Cattle? Dairy? Grain? They're all in the mix. It even shipped out $17.4 billion in manufactured goods. Not bad for a state most people still picture as desert, salt, and sermons. A coastline would be nice, but Utah's got the essentials: energy, food, and industry all behind a wall of mountains. It's a natural fortress, and if it joins forces with Colorado, that's not a state anymore. That's Fort Knox with après-ski. Oh, and you're probably wondering about California. Of course it survives. It always does. Sun, money, and lawyers. It's practically immortal. It was too obvious, so I'm saying it here, mostly to prove how thorough I am. If the US ever actually broke apart, who wins the Great American Breakup? My money's on Texas, but I wouldn't bet against California's lawyers. They've toppled scarier things than governments, and they bill by the hour. Thanks for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you want to see more videos like this, then please consider subscribing and turn on notifications. Really does make a difference. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time on MatPack.